Hello, this is Dr. Joe Trout from the physics program at Stockton University. This video is an introduction to spreadsheets. There are various brands of spreadsheets, but today we'll be using the Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. The features you learn today are common in most modern spreadsheets. A spreadsheet is a powerful tool that lets us organize and analyze data. The spreadsheet is broken up into cells, and the cells are referenced by their column, which are designated with a letter, and their row, which is designated for a number. We enter the data into cells, and if we click on a cell, this happens to be cell A1, and you can tell that by this name box up here. This is cell A1. If you wanted to store the number 3 here, you would just click on the box, type the number 3, and hit the Enter key. I can move anywhere around the spreadsheet and, for instance, highlight cell E8. I know it's cell E8 because of the E and the 8 are highlighted, and once again in the name box is E8. Spreadsheets can do more than save data. For instance, they can do simple mathematic operations or arithmetic operations. For instance, we can add two numbers. These equations and later formulas have to start with an equal sign. So for instance, if we wanted to type equals 3 plus 5, 3 plus 5 is 8, and if I hit return, the letter 8 appears there. If I wanted to edit or change that cell, I would click on that cell again, and the equation shows up here on the formula bar. Let's say instead of 3 plus 5, I wanted to say 3 plus 6. I can change the 5 to a 6, hit Enter, and 9 will be in the box. There's of course other arithmetic operations that can be performed. For instance, we could do 3 times 6, and this symbol is known as the asterisk, and it's the character above the 8 on the keyboard. Three times 6 is 18, and 18 appears in the box. We could also divide, so we can say equals 9 divided by 3, and the divide sign is the slash that's located below the question mark on your keyboard. We can also clear out the contents of cells. If you click on one cell and hold the mouse button down, that's the left mouse button, and drag it down, you can highlight both of these cells. You can then hit the delete key, and that will clear these cells. Under the Home tab, So these areas up here are called tabs. You can see there's a bunch of functions we can do. For instance, we can change the format. So for instance, we can change it to bold or italics or underline. We can make it bigger or smaller. We can change the color of the font, and we can change the color of the cell. We can also type text into a cell and save that. For example, let's say we had 10 test scores and we wanted to find the average of them. I'm going to move up to cell A1 and type test scores. And hit enter. And you see that the words test scores appear in the box or in the cell. You may notice that the words have overrun the cell boundary. An easy way to fix this is if you move up to where the columns are labeled. You'll see the cursor will change, and then if you double click, it'll make the cell size the proper size. Now let's say take our 10 test scores. Let's say you got 100 on the first test, a 98 on the second test. You had a bad day and got a 23 on the one test. And then you had various other tests ranging between 0 and 100. Let's say you had a couple of bad days. Now let's see, we want to find out what your average is. There's something in Excel called functions, and they can be used to do a lot of the work for you. I'm going to find the average a couple different ways, and to do so I'm going to put labels on the answers that I get. And what I want to do is insert a column here. If I want to insert a column, all I have to do is type on the A. I click on the A and then use the right hand mouse button and insert. It'll insert a new column for me. It'll move B over. It'll move the cells that were in A over to B. So as I said, we're going to do this a couple of ways. So let's find the average the first way. You probably know that to find the average, you sum up all the numbers and then divide by the number of items. So let's try it that way first. We have equals, because we're going to do a calculation. I'm going to open a parentheses, and now what I can do is go to cell B2 and click on it. Notice it filled in cell B2 for me. Then plus B3, and plus B4, and so on. So all the way from B2 to B11. And then I want to divide that sum by the number of entries, which was 10. Remember we said we had 10 test scores. So we can divide by 10. The parentheses is needed because what we want to do first is sum up the numbers and then divide by 10. And now I hit enter. And because of those couple of bad tests, it looks like our average is a C. Spreadsheets have something called functions that make some of this work easier for you. So let's try finding the average using functions. The first function we'll talk about is sum. So I'll say equals sum, and notice when you start to type, a box will come up with suggestions on what you're trying to put in there. So it's showing you the functions that are available. And I just want to add the numbers together, so I'm going to sum up these numbers. Now instead of clicking on each cell this time, what we could do is click on the first cell and hold the mouse button down. So notice that put in cell B2, and then drag the mouse down while you're holding the mouse button down until we get to B11. And then we can close the parentheses. Now we want to divide by the number there that are of items that we're trying to take the average of. So we put the slash, which means divide. And we know there's 10, but let's say we didn't know how many numbers there were. Well, there's a function called count, and it counts the number of cells. So if we double click, if we click on that, and then highlight the number, the cells we're interested in, it'll count them for us. So hopefully we'll get the same answer if we hit enter. We get 72. But there's an even easier way. Once again, these are just labels so people know what it is that's in that cell. There is, of course, a function called average. Many of the functions are shortened variations. So for instance, average deviation is AVEDEV. But for average, it's actually the full name because it's such a small word, we could type it in. Once again, we can click on the first number, hold the mouse button down, and drag down to B11. And actually, we should close the parentheses, but if we forget, the spreadsheet will do it for us, right? It knows, it figures out what you want to do sometimes. Once again, these are all the same. There's other interesting functions, such as standard deviation, which shows how much spread there is in the data. So I'm going to label this standard deviation. If you'd like, you can spell it out. Once again, it's too long, so let's resize the cell. So don't forget to resize the cell. I moved the mouse pointer up to in between the two columns, A and B. The cursor has changed, if you notice. And then double click, and it'll make the cell the appropriate size to fit the words. You might not remember what the function name for standard deviation is, but if you click on the cell and hit equals and start the word, ST, okay, there's actually a whole bunch of choices there. And if you move down the list, what you will see is that Excel will give you an explanation of what each one is. I'm going to do a simple standard deviation, and you can use the help menu to find out what these other functions do and how they differ. And sometimes you make mistakes. So we're going to say equals the standard deviation, and double click on the function and highlight the values that you're interested in, and it'll tell you how much of a variance there is, or a standard deviation, or how much of a spread there is in the data that you're looking at. We can also find out what the median is. This is the value for which half of the numbers are above and half of the numbers are below. In this case, there's an even number of entries. So what we'll see is that we actually come up with a fraction. It actually will give us the average between the middle two numbers. So if I look down this list here, we have 23 and 23 and 24, 77, and an 88. So I'm expecting the mean to be somewhere between 88 and 89, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers below it, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers above it. So of course there's a function for that. It's called median, and it says it returns the median, the number in the middle of the given set of numbers. We highlight the numbers, and we get 88.5, which is what we expected. I'm going to move over to cell D13. So here's D, and I'll move down to D13. Once again, notice that it's shown in the name box. And let's find our maximum score, so the highest score. And let's find the minimum score, so that's our lowest score. There's of course a function for that, max. And we know that the maximum should be 100, and it is. And there's a function called min. And that will let us show us our lowest exam. In this case is 23. Now this is all fine, but you know what? I'm going to hand this spreadsheet in to someone, and I forgot to put my name on it. And my name should be in cell A1 so the person, me, can see it rather quickly. What I'm going to do is insert a new row here. If I click on the 1, I can click with the right hand mouse button, go to insert, and it'll insert a row for me, and there I can put my name. I would really appreciate it if you put your name in cell A1, because even if you send it to me in an email, I have to open it up and then I have to go back and forth checking to see who this is from. And if I hit enter, it'll save it for me. Speaking of saving, you should save your spreadsheets often. How do you save? Go up to the File tab and click Then you can type Save As, and I'm going to save it to my computer, and I'm going to put it in my Documents folder. And I'm going to call this Assignment 1 and put my name so that people know who the file belongs to. I can then type Save and it'll save it for me. If I click on File, Close, it'll close the file. And occasionally resize the spreadsheet. So let me bring it back so you can see it. If I want to open up the file again, I can say File, Open, and it shows recent workbooks that I've worked on. But I can also go to the computer and desktop. I'm sorry, it was in Documents, but that's okay. I can look down, scroll down the file listing here and go to Documents, and there's my file. If I click on it, it will open it for me. So now we're back to where we were. There's also a lot of formatting options you can do. By the way, you can resize your spreadsheet by grabbing one of the corners and resizing it. So for instance, let's say I want my name to be bold. I can click on the B on the Home menu, or on the Home tab. I can also make it a little bit larger. I can change the color. And if I'd like, I can put a box around it. So now that was a little bit about formatting. You may notice that the standard deviation is 34.312291. That's probably too much information, right? We probably don't need to save all those decimal places. So if you'd like, you can click on it, go to the Home tab, and you can either subtract or add the number of decimal places. So for instance, we can shorten this so it's only 2 decimal places. Also, you might not like the alignment. So I have everything aligned to the right, so this is called right justified. If I click on this column, what I can do is make it center justified. Center justified. So it lies in the center. Or left justified. Put it to the left. Or to the right. Or I really liked it how it looked in the center, so I'm going to leave it there. Okay, so this was a quick introduction to how spreadsheets work and what they're useful for. This also should be enough to get you through the first assignment. Thank you for your time. And next time we'll talk more about functions and how to manipulate data or analyze data. All right, thanks for your time.